Today we're looking at Psalm 53. This is a hard-hitting psalm that cannot be ignored, not least because it's almost a word-for-word repetition of Psalm 14. It begins with the searing phrase, "The fool has said in his heart, there is no God." Now let's be clear, this is not an attack on atheists or atheism per se, for atheism was unheard of in David's time. Instead, at heart level, this is describing a spiritual denial of the God of Israel, a refusal to accept or receive Jehovah. It's a refusal of God's right to rule our hearts and minds. It's a rejection of God's offer and way of salvation. It's foolish to say, I don't need God to save me, and I refuse to allow him to rule over me. I can live without him. How foolish. Verse 3 is a haunting phrase. Everyone has turned away. Before we were lovingly drawn empty-handed to Christ as God's agent of salvation, we were those who denied his existence as the Lord of all and specifically rejected his rule in our hearts. Today, as we reflect on this difficult psalm, let's not move quickly away from its searing or haunting phrases. In Matthew 7, Jesus described as foolish builders, those people who listened to his words but did not put them into practice. He warned that their houses would fall when inevitable storms would come. James says, don't just listen to God's word. You must do what it says. Otherwise, you are only fooling yourselves. So David concludes in verse 6 with the liberating phrase, "Oh, that salvation for Israel would come out of Zion." And it did in the person of Jesus. Today, church, let us heed the exhortation of Peter in 1 Peter 3, verse 15. Set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts.